Hey, what is going on, Terminator fans? Welcome back to my channel. I greatly appreciate all the support that you've all given me. As always, if you're new to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button for amazing Terminator content. Today I'm going to be continuing my discussion on Terminator 6 Dark Fate that comes out later this year, November 1st. And I'm super excited for the release of that film. I'm going to be, all the way up into the film, I'm going to be making all kinds of Terminator content, discussing, Terminator 6 and all the other, sequels that have came out. I've done the retrospective series. I've reviewed all the films to this point, and if you were interested in seeing those, go ahead and check my channel out for the retrospectives. Anyways, guys, today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about Terminator timelines and the different stories from Terminator 1, Terminator 2, and Terminator 3, and you're probably wondering, why am I going to be discussing Terminator 3? It is not canon anymore. All the films that came after Terminator 2 are not canon in this new timeline. Well, the reason why I'm going to be discussing Terminator 3's timeline is because I think it's very, very appropriate to look at how the production of Terminator 3 moved on from the events of Terminator 2. You have to kind of assume that the production team, Tim Miller, James Cameron, all these other directors, when they were sitting around that room discussing, plotting out the whole trilogy for this new Terminator film, they had to kind of look at Terminator 3 and what worked and what didn't work. And it's the same kind of scenario that they're working with Terminator 6. Terminator 6 is going to replace Terminator 3 as the new sequel to Terminator 2. So they're dealing with the same thing. The production team from T3 and production team of T3 had to sit down and look at what transpired in Terminator 2 and how they were going to move forward with the story. So I feel like some of the things that they're going to do in this film are going to be kind of similar, okay? They're going to be similar in some ways, but different in others. I think that James Cameron and Tim Miller are going to try to simplify the story. I feel like Terminator 3 and all the sequels after that were very convoluted, so they are going to simplify it. But for the purpose of this video today, I kind of want to just look at what they did in the timeline of Terminator 3 and how they move forward from Terminator 2. And then we can start talking about, our different ideas of where they're going to take the sequel, what happened in Terminator 2 and how it's going to have an effect on Terminator 6. Which you saw in my video yesterday, I discussed 2 interview clips from the end of 2017 where Tim Miller and James Cameron sat down and they had an interview about the upcoming sequel, Terminator 6 Dark Fate, and their ideas about, artificial intelligence and Sarah Connor's character from Terminator 2. And there was an interesting tidbit of information from that interview where Tim Miller said that the choices that Sarah Connor made and the events that happened in Terminator 2 are going to have a cost. And they're going to have some consequences for Terminator 6, okay? I found that to be very fascinating. When I first saw that clip, I didn't think too much of it, but now it's got me really thinking. And I've just been sitting down, looking at the different Terminator timelines, trying to wrap my head around everything and trying to think of, okay, what happened in Terminator 2 that could change this future timeline, and how are they going to explain what happened from 1995 until 2019? So that's what we're here to do today, guys. And as always, in the comment section, leave me your comments. What are your thoughts on this new timeline? How are they going to pick up from the events of Terminator 2 Judgment Day? What little plot points that happen in Terminator 2 Judgment Day are going to change the story and create this new timeline in 2019? Alright, guys, so I went and drew the timelines down on a piece of paper, and I'm just going to quickly go through the timelines and then we can get into a discussion about Terminator 6 Dark Fate. Alright, so the first timeline, everybody knows the story of the Terminator movies. We've got the Terminator 1984, and it's a very simple timeline. You got the Terminator, the T-800 and Kyle Reese basically come back to 1984. The Terminator's mission is to kill Sarah Connor to prevent the birth of John Connor, who is the future resistance leader. And basically we get a pivotal point in 2029, which Kyle Reese and the T-800 come from 2029. And they go all the way back to 1984. And that is kind of like the tipping point where John Connor is about to win the war. So in order to prevent that victory, Skynet sends the Terminator back in time and Kyle Reese comes back to protect Sarah. That is a very simple timeline. Back when this film came out, everybody thought it was really complex, but we've seen all the sequels to this point and it's actually a pretty simple timeline. And then we get into Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which it gets a little bit different, and, you know, things change a little bit. It's a little bit more convoluted, but, you know, James Cameron said in some interviews in the past that he knew that this was going to be like a game changer and was going to change things. And there was really no good way to link the two different timelines from the 1984 Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Some things are never going to be explained. There's some loopholes, some plot holes with Terminator 2 Judgment Day, but I'm not going to get into that today. I'm just going to talk about the timeline. So I actually inserted some of the you know, the points in time from Terminator 1, because it is a continuation of the timeline from Terminator 1. You get 1984, once again, we see the events of Terminator. And that's when, you know, the T-800 and Kyle Reese come back. And then we learn in this timeline, see in the previous movie, we didn't know when John Connor was going to be born. But we find out that Kyle Reese is the father of John Connor, and he is born in 1985, okay? A year after the events, or, you know, 9 months after the events of the first Terminator. John Connor is born. Then we jump forward and we get to 1995, where we see the events of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and we get a new Terminator, the T-1000. We also got another T-800. Uncle Bob comes back. And the T-1000's mission is to now kill John Connor, because it's not seeking out Sarah Connor, because there's no need to. John Connor's already born. And so he comes back to kill John Connor. And then Uncle Bob's comes back. He's a reprogrammed T-800 from the future. So now we learn that the future John Connor, basically, in order to save himself, has to send back a reprogrammed T-800. Okay? Now, it gets interesting because now we actually learn when Judgment Day is going to happen. Okay? So we didn't have a specific date from the first Terminator. We learned that, you know, when Kyle Reese was, at some point in time, when Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor were together in 1984, he discussed the events of this entire timeline. And we didn't learn about that until this movie, of what he discussed. But he told Sarah that Judgment Day was going to happen in 1997. That's when the nuclear bombs were going to happen. That's when the beginning of the machines, when they were going to become self-aware. We also get some discussion with Uncle Bob and John Connor and Sarah when they're driving out to the Mexican border, and he says, you know, what transpires in 1997, and that Skynet becomes self-aware. So that's what we learn in this film. And then we always have this timeline, 2029, where, you know, that's where future John Connor sends back, you know, Kyle Reese. The original T-800 gets sent back. We get the T-1000, and then we also get Uncle Bob, the reprogrammed T-800. So that's the Terminator 2 timeline, which is what they're going to have to work with for Terminator 6. So somewhere in here, they're going to basically, you know, this isn't going to exist anymore. 1997 moving forward is going to be an alternate timeline, which, you know, we'll see that in Terminator 3, kind of how they kind of mapped it out. All right. Now, this is where things get interesting in Terminator 3. Now, I know this is not canon anymore, but I wanted to kind of explain to you all and show you all how this production team decided to explain the events of Terminator 2, of what happened after Terminator 2. And you have to honestly think about it. You know, T6, the production team, they're going to look at this. They're going to look at it and see what worked and how they did that and how their movie is going to be different and how they're going to explain things, okay? Because Terminator 3 and Terminator 6 are working with the same source material, okay? They're working with T1 and T2. They're both direct sequels to Terminator 2, okay? So it's the same, you know, it's the same scenario. Both production teams looking at the same thing. But anyways, guys, so we get all the stuff that transpired in T1 and T2. I'm not going to go over all that. The difference here now is there is an alternate timeline, okay? After the events of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, we learn that Sarah Connor basically, and Sarah and John, they go to Cyberdyne Systems and they blow up the Cyberdyne factory, and basically that presumably changes the timeline moving forward. And this timeline right here does not exist anymore. It comes down here and we get this alternate timeline for T3, okay? Now, they explain in T3 that John met Cape Rooster sometime around the beginning, or prior to the events of T2 Judgment Day. It was literally like a few days or like a week before what we see in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. He meets Kate Brewster. They basically they go and they kiss and stuff, and they don't see each other again until Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Okay, so that's that timeline right there. So I said basically 1995, around the same time. Then we also get now. Now, I always thought it was 2003, but I went and Wikipedia'd it, and it's actually 2004. The movie came out in 2003, but it's actually 2004. The events of the Rise of the Machines. Okay? So we see another T-800. We see the TX come back in time, and it's got a new objective. The TX cannot locate John Connor because he's gone into hiding, and Kate Brewster is actually the new resistance leader. Okay? Whether that was a choice by John Connor, so that way it would take the target off him and he could kind of lead the resistance behind the scenes. I mean, we don't really know. But Kate Brewster is the new resistance leader, and all of the lieutenants are the targets in this movie. So this TX comes back in time to kill all the lieutenants and kill Kate Brewster. Okay. Now it's got a secondary mission, and if it can locate John Connor, it will kill John Connor. But its primary mission is to kill Kate Brewster and the lieutenants. And that's what we see play out in Terminator 3. Then moving forward, you got all these different timelines, okay? You've got 2032. We see that, we learn in Terminator 3 that in 2032, the T-800 from this film tells John Connor and Rise of the Machines that the reason why he didn't send why Kate Brewster sent the T-800 back is because the T-800 killed him and he did not exist. Okay? So they essentially wrote out his character in the future. He exists in the current timeline, but he doesn't exist in the future anymore. To a certain point, he dies in 2032. Okay? So, does this still kind of happen? Or is it just strictly this? That's my question right here. Okay? These other Terminators that kind of... now, this is like... You have to be a complete, time travel nerd to understand all this. But basically, does this all kind of still happen? Or is it just strictly this new timeline? I don't know. I'm not a future, time travel expert. But what I do know is that this is like an alternative timeline. Alright, guys. So, looking at all those timelines... I think it's really fascinating... If you're, in particular, looking at Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines and how they decided to, work off the events of Terminator 2, okay? What they did, essentially, is they created a new character, Kate Brewster, to essentially create this new timeline. She's kind of like the new John Connor in this film, okay? She's now the leader of the Resistance. And I have to say, guys, I would expect... in this film that Sarah Connor is the new John Connor, okay? I'm not saying that John Connor doesn't exist in Terminator 6 because we know that they've casted the young Drew Colley to play a younger younger John Connor, and they've got Brett Azar as the body double for the T-800. So they're going to explain some things with John Connor. But like I said in my previous videos, we do not have a casted John Connor in adult form in this timeline, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Are they going to create a new character who's going to be a new Resistance leader, or is Sarah Connor going to become the leader of the Resistance? That's what they're going to have to explain. Or is there no Resistance anymore? I mean, things could be completely, drastically different. Because Cyberdyne Systems has been now wiped out. We have to look at, okay, what happened after the Cyberdyne Systems got blown up? Was there information, filed away at another site? Did they have backup information or backup files located somewhere else? Did they not get rid of all of the information and data for the Terminator? So is there going to be another company that's developing, Skynet? Okay. Also, we have the arm that was left in the steel factory from Uncle Bob. It got crushed in the machine. Does somebody find that arm? Do they develop some technology based off that? There's all kinds of little things that are in Terminator 2, which they could take this story moving forward. What I think is really fascinating, and what I've been kind of thinking about lately, when Tim Miller talks about the costs of the events of Terminator 2 and how it's going to affect Terminator 6, I can't help but think, guys, okay, they went and blew up Cyberdyne Systems, right? Law enforcement has got to be going absolutely crazy trying to find Sarah Connor and John Connor. I mean, you think about real life events that have affected us, you know, terrorism and all that sort of thing. Terrorism and what Sarah and John did in that film would have been taken so seriously. You would have had SWAT teams out. You would have had a freaking manhunt. They would have been on FBI's top wanted list. I mean, you got to expect that there's going to be people looking for Sarah and John. We know that in this film, it takes place that, you know, Sarah's been kind of hiding out in Mexico. So presumably they've been kind of hiding this entire time. But the whole point I'm getting to is that is going to be a cost as well. They're going to be on the run, similar to what John Connor was doing in Rise of the Machines. He was hiding out. He was living off the grid. Sarah's going to be doing the same thing. I feel like if there is John Connor's character in this movie, he's going to be somehow living off the grid. Then you also get the people, you know, in Cyberdyne, the SWAT team, when they were shooting at Arnold and they saw him getting lit up with bullets and they saw pieces of his flesh flying off and stuff. You have to think these people probably knew, okay, this is bizarre. This guy's getting shot up. He's taking all kinds of bullets and stuff, and he's not dying. They know something's off, and so they're going to probably be writing all kinds of reports about this, and you know, people are going to learn about the existence of the Terminators. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And then you got Miles Dyson's wife and kids who now know of the existence of the future. I mean, how long are they going to keep that secret, okay? We saw, and I don't want to get too much in it, but we saw in Genesis how they explained Miles Dyson's, you know, son took up the Genesis program. I mean, that was a ridiculous story, but I mean, we see how all these different little plot holes are going to have an effect in this new sequel. They have to explain all this stuff, okay? What are your thoughts, guys? I mean, am I just going crazy, just stir crazy thinking about Terminator? All these different things are like, you know, just bubbling up in my brain. I can't stop thinking about what they're going to do with this new sequel and where they're going to take it and how they're going to tell the story of what happened and what transpired between Terminator 2 and Terminator 6. That's what I'm really curious about. And that's why I thought it was really appropriate to discuss these different timelines and what they could possibly do and how it's going to be different. I just love Terminator, guys. And I really appreciate everybody tuning into my videos. I know, you know, there's a lot of fascinating theories out there. And I'm not sitting here saying that all my ideas are, you know, what's going to happen in the film. I mean, we could be everybody that thinks about Terminator could be completely off. And my ideas could be completely wrong. We could see something completely different than we've ever seen before, which is honestly what I think they're going to do. I think it's going to be so drastically different because there is such a huge time span between Terminator 2 and Terminator 6. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and it got your brain thinking about possible ideas for this new movie. I hope you enjoyed the content. As always, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe to my channel for future Terminator content. All support's greatly appreciated. Until next time, guys, take it easy.